Tariffs on, tariffs off. The Premier of Ontario in Canada has suspended an electricity surcharge on 3 US states. Premier Doug Ford says he was instead agreeing to meet the US Commerce Secretary in Washington, where they'll discuss cross-border trade. And other provinces are also putting pressure on the United States. Manitoba's Premier pulled American alcohol from government liquor stores. Wab Kinew is the Premier of Manitoba. He joins me now. That was a largely symbolic measure since the alcohol had been paid for, as more than one person pointed out on Twitter. But it sent the message, and that message was that Canada's not to be messed around with.
Well, pulling the alcohol off the shelves was also accompanied with canceling all the orders for the rest of the year, which, if you add up all the provinces across Canada, means we're pulling a few $billions out of the American economy. So symbolism, yes, when we stop ordering Kentucky bourbon and start drinking Crown Royal from right here in Manitoba instead. But it's also a multi-billion-dollar way that we can stick up for ourselves in the midst of these tariffs that keep getting threatened by Donald Trump.
Where can you in Manitoba put the most pressure, do you think?
Well, I think you've seen through Premier Ford's actions with electricity that is a significant tool that we have in the toolbox to stand up for Canada and to stand up for our subnational jurisdictions as well. Here in Manitoba, just to give you and your viewers a bit of context, we export, depending on the time of year, hundreds of megawatts at very least, potentially thousands of megawatts to the Midwestern United States. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of electricity exports. So that's big business. So of course we want to be judicious and very careful with decisions here, but when we're looking at a potentially huge threat to our nationwide economy, it is important for us to look at these tools and to send a message to the American administration.
So the new Prime Minister, or will be Prime Minister, Mark Carney, there's going to be an election. He won't be in office. I mean, before the election, he's not going to be there in office for that long. The Liberals think they can win this time.
Yeah, I think there's tons of great talking heads on all the panel shows that we get to watch on your network and others who can break down all the ins and outs of the politics. What I'll say is that we'll work with whoever the good people across Canada to elect. But if you were wondering what the ballot question is going to be in the Canadian election this year, it's all going to be about who is best positioned to take on Donald Trump. And while that federal election is taking place, the premiers, such as myself, Doug Ford, and all of our colleagues from coast to coast to coast will be stepping up to provide that reassurance to Canadians that we're putting your jobs first, our economy first.
At the end of the day, and this is more of a, I suppose, a touchy-feely question than a hard economic one per se. I tweeted after I saw Mark Carney's very strong speech that, you know, I believed it will take a generation at least before the resentment levels in Canada, where I've been many times, as you know, the resentment levels about the way you've been treated by your southern neighbour. How do you view the long-term damage to the fabric of that relationship?
Well, Richard, you're quite right that when Canadians hear that talk about 51st state, it's a visceral, emotional, negative reaction, and Canadians push back. We're a nation of hockey players, so we know how to handle ourselves if there's a good scrap, if you will. But I would also say this about us being a nation of hockey players: we can have it out on the ice, and we know how to have a beer with each other once the game is over. So again, when we're thinking about the situation with tariffs and all the back and forth over the past few days and few weeks, what I would say is this. It's often said in politics, you relate before you negotiate. And I would hope that for the Trump administration, now that they've seen that Canada will push back and Canada is somebody that they should view as a peer to respect, that now that they can relate to us, we can get back to that table and have them negotiate with us.
You know, Premier, I'm just looking at behind you. There's the two flags. There's obviously the Canadian flag and there's your state flag. But in your state flag, you have the Union Jack. You have the Union flag because, of course, Canada is a realm of His Majesty King Charles III. And I just wonder, I mean, We've been talking about it quite a bit. It's a very strange business, isn't it? When the US president wants to oust the king as the head of state of your country.
Well, the other thing that we got on our beautiful Manitoba flag is the bison. And one of the things that, colloquially, the buffalo that they always say is that the bison, in the midst of a winter blizzard, will face into the storm. And I think that's exactly what we've been showing in Manitoba and across Canada right now, is even when this trade tariff talk escalates in the Trump administration to sometimes these comments about the 51st state, we're still greeting those challenges head on. We're that bison, that herd of bison, if you will, sticking together and facing this winter storm head on.
I shall invite myself to your state when we shall present Questmeans business, and I invite you to join us, sir. I look forward to being in your state.
Anytime.
Thank you, sir.